Squash has been making strides in gender equality, thanks to leaders like you. If you could create a dream mixed doubles match with any historical figure, athletes or not, who would you pick and why?
I would probably put Billie Jean King in there with, say, one of our, top young players like Ali Farag from Egypt. And then I would maybe put, who would I put on the other team? I would put maybe somebody like a Nelson Mandela, because he really understood the power of sport. And I have a great quote that I'll share with you later from Mandela. And I would put him maybe with, our current top American player, a young woman named Olivia Weaver.
Welcome to Sustainable Futures with Daniela Bas, where innovation meets impact. Join me every first and the third Saturday at 10 a.m. Central European Time for engaging conversations with visionaries reshaping industries like fashion, tech, tourism, sports, and more through social fairness and sustainability. As a global leader and change maker, I share fresh insights and actionable ideas to inspire meaningful change and drive results. Tune in, subscribe, and help shape a brighter, sustainable future.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening in whichever part of the world you are. How exciting to have as guest Ashley Bernhard. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today and share your passion and the work you have done to create equality, leadership, and empowerment. But before sharing more about your incredible career, I would like to know if there was a moment that changed you, a moment when you realized this was something you had to do, Ashley.
Thank you, Daniela. It's such a pleasure to be here. And so, my journey towards leadership and equality and empowerment started back in about 2012. And I always love talking about people's journeys because I think a lot of us think the journey goes like this, but a lot of times it goes like this. And I was taking our son, Alex, who was 11 at the time, to the finals at the Tournament of Champions, which is a professional squash tournament that's held in Grand Central Terminal here in New York City. Mm-hmm. They put a glass court up and all the top players come from around the world. And we were standing before the finals started, and we were looking at the draw, and they had these two thermometers on the draw with a red, marker for the prize money. And at that time, the prize money for the men, I think, was $155,000, and the prize money for the women was $25,000. So the visual, as you can imagine, was very stark, these two red lines on the thermometer. And so my son said to me, he said, "Mom, why do the women get paid so much less than the men?" And you have to remember, this is 2012. This was a very different landscape. Women in sports was not a sexy topic. It was not a popular topic. And as I was thinking like how to respond to an 11-year-old boy, he's pulling on me. He says, "Can't you do something about it?" And that is how it started. So we, from there, I waited until the tournament was over. And I reached out to my dear friend and now colleague, John Nimick, who owns and runs the tournament. And I said, "Look, let's talk about this." And we got the conversation started, and we started the women's leadership program at the Tournament of Champions. We sold out our first year, which was the following year, 2013, before we even sent the invitations out. And then within 3 years, we had equal prize money. Yeah, you see, so it was very exciting.
It is exciting, and this is who you are. This is Ashley Bernhard, the founder of Heaven Hill. She is a visionary leader in women's empowerment and has redefined the intersection of sports, gender equity, and corporate governance. I mean, you are really a key force in professional squash, and you pioneered equal prize money and leadership programs, formative initiatives like the JP Morgan Women's Leadership Program, And as a UN consultant and diplomatic spouse career group founder, you have received global recognition, including the Citizen of the World Award. So, Ashley, before sharing with us the powerful insights on fairness, inclusion, and creating scalable impact in a rapidly evolving world, I have a jolly question for all my guests. Are you ready?
Yes.
Good. Squash has been making strides in gender equality, thanks to leaders like you. If you could create a dream mixed doubles match with any historical figure, athletes or not, who would you pick and why?
For okay, so in doubles squash, there are two teams of two. So I would probably do mixed doubles, and I would put gosh, that's such a great question. I would probably put Billie Jean King in there with, say, one of our top young players like Ali Farag from Egypt, and then I would maybe put who would I put on the other team? I would put maybe somebody like a Nelson Mandela, because he really understood the power of sport. And I have a great quote that I'll share with you later from Mandela. And I would put him maybe with, our current top American player, a young woman named Olivia Weaver.
And I think this sounds to be an amazing team of athletes and non athletes, but each of them is a symbol of something, and I
Yep.
love it. So tell me about your involvement in the push for equal prize money within professional squash tour. You already mentioned something, but I would like you to go a teeny bit more deeper in that.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing in hindsight, looking back at the equal prize money, is that it's really not just about the money at the end of the day. There's so many layers to equal prize money, and the journey to equal prize money, I really like to think of as a roadmap for other sports and industries to use. It's really not that hard, to be honest with you. It's just getting everybody on board is the tricky part. But one of the key things for us as a sport was that I used to be in about 2013. I was on the board of what was called the Women's Squash Association. So at that time, you had two separate governing bodies for the sport, like you do for tennis, like you do for, American basketball. There are very few sports that have one governing body for both men and women. And at that time, both tours were the women's tour was really struggling. The men's tour was kind of flat. And we identified pretty early that we needed to merge the two together. And that's where the money part is a little tricky, because even in a small sport where there wasn't a lot at stake financially, it was hard to merge the two governing bodies together. But so that was the first step. And what it really taught me is that equality, it's very difficult to have equality when men and women are not playing on the same playing field. So, when you have two separate governing bodies, you have two sets of bylaws, they may be very close, but they're not going to be the same. So anyways, that was the first key to moving towards equality. And we had, at the time, it was, there were very few women in management and on the board. Mm-hmm. But the men that I worked with, like John Nimick at the Tournament of Champions and the CEO of the Professional Squash Association, and really the secret weapon has been a man named Tommy Burden, who's the chief commercial officer. And the reason why I point that out is that the other thing I've learned along the way is when you want sustainable change, mm-hmm. You have to do it together. So it was really a combination of the men and the women working together. And back then, as I say, I'm talking about like 2013. So it was a very different landscape when we started out on this journey. And the first thing was to make sure that the men didn't feel like they were being blamed for something like that happened, in the 1970s or 80s or 90s. So as soon as they understood that they were going to be part of a solution and not blamed for something that happened in the past, we moved like lightning. It went so fast. But so behind the scenes, when I say that there's so many different layers, what I mean is that, like, okay, so with squash, for those of you who don't know what the sport is, you play against a wall, and there's a red line on the wall that would be like the net for tennis. And before the merger, which happened in 2016, the women played with a different line. It was higher than the men's. So we brought like that into alignment. So everybody was playing at the same tin height. They play with the same size ball, which I know may seem like a small little thing, but like in basketball, I didn't know until recently that the women play with a different size ball than the men. It's a little different. So there's equality there. And they play 3 out of 5 games. Unlike tennis is 2 out of 3 for the women, 3 out of 5 for the men. So on the outward facing part of the game, we brought that all into alignment. Then behind the scenes, as soon as we merged, what I said was like, now you have the men and the women all being governed by the same bylaws, the same set of rules. And then little things that if you're not involved with sports that you may not know is that, so in our case, like the rankings were done a little bit differently for the men and women. So that we all brought into alignment. And then you have social media was very important to us to then start broadcasting equal time for the men and the women on social media. And the commercial side of the business, where the revenue flow comes from, the sponsors, the betting rights, the media rights, we're all starting to flow through one organization. So instead of 2 organizations, it just it makes it much easier to have equal prize money and sponsorship opportunities and stuff. And so once we got all that into place, things started to move pretty quickly. And although it seemed like a long road from, say, 2016 to the Olympics in LA 28, which is going to be the first Olympics for squash,
just around the corner,
we would not have gotten into the Olympic Games without equal prize money and the investment that we've put into the women's tour and the men's tour. Yeah, so.
It requires lots of passion, negotiating skills, and leadership. And talking about leadership, what were some of the issues you discovered around the leadership in the journey to equal prize money, Ashley?
Well, it's a great question, Daniela. And one of the first things that I learned was that, and I learned it very early on, was that we had to have the men on side. It had to be a partnership. It had to be men and women working together for the same goal. It just logistically would not have happened if the men weren't on board. So that was the biggest, like, sort of piece of the puzzle. And what I realized was that, we needed to have women at the table in a decision-making seat. We read about this and we hear about, things like we need more women in the C-suite. We need more women in boardrooms. Well, it's actually true. It really is true, because it's not, one of the things I learned, it's not that the men at that stage, they weren't trying to be disrespectful in any way, but it wasn't their main focus, like to
Mhm.
concentrate on the women's division. So having the seat at the table is a big piece of the leadership puzzle. And the other thing that I learned, and I know that you know this well from your work, is that by doing the right thing, it ended up actually being like the smart thing to do for the sport. So, we were all doing it actually for the right reasons. And then all of a sudden, the data starts pouring in where the rising tide is lifting all the boats. So I think that sometimes with equality is that you get to a certain point. Say for us, it was like equal prize money. And then there's like a little bit of a fear that there's not enough to go around. Well, are you going to be taking money from the men and giving it to the women? And no, the answer is that actually the pot expanded. And I'm sure you're familiar with the McKinsey women in the workplace, is like when you invest in women, everything goes up: customer satisfaction, creativity, employee retention, revenue. And what we saw, and we saw it very quickly, Daniela. It was like within 18 months. So we're able to collect data from a whole year on the tour. But now we're looking at data going back for our 10-year data points. So the year before the merger to end of December 2024. And to give you an idea of what the rising tide looks like, we had the overall prize money for both the men and the women has gone up 107%.
Wow.
And we just collected this data, so it's fresh. The social media impressions has gone up 939%.
Ooh.
And the revenue, which is of course like what drives and keeps the sport in business, has gone up 642%. And you just can't hide from that data. So the merger in the end and investing in the women and mandating the equal prize money has just been a benefit for everybody.
Women is a big niche, right? Because it involves everything from fashion to, I mean, the right clothes to play, etc. It's a huge investment, and
Yeah.
and it brings also facilitates athletes or amateurs to play their favorite sport in such a way that they also feel comfortable, and it improves their well-being. So is the focus on high profile events and programs enough? Or does true change require also a grassroots revolution?
Well, I think that the answer to that is sort of two pronged in a way, because at least the way we're approaching it in professional squash is we're taking a top down and a bottom up approach. And so at the top, I think, yes, like we really do need to focus on those high profile tournaments, because they get the media, they have the spectators. And when we spoke earlier about squash being a roadmap for other industries, and I talk about this like at our women's leadership program, is that
Mm-hmm.
sport has this power to get messages across to very large groups. And so if you are sitting in the audience at a squash match and you see that the men are getting paid the same as the women, it may resonate with you somewhere in the back of your head, like, oh, I should be making sure I'm getting paid the same as the men. Or, if you're a business leader, to see, oh, well, they're doing it, we should be doing it too.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it's very important, and we put a lot of resources into the top, but at the same time, we're investing in the grassroots, because that's the future of the sport. It's the future of really any initiative, are the people that are coming through the pipeline from the bottom. So we have a foundation, the Professional Squash Association Foundation. We do a lot of work with urban squash programs, legacy programs where big tournaments are held. We get kids involved. We partner very closely with the World Squash Federation. And yeah, so it's important for us to like attack it from both sides. Yeah, but it's like if you imagine if you just focused on the grassroots, which is so important, then there's no kind of roadmap. Like as Billie Jean King says, you have to see it to be it. So you want to say like, oh, sport can help you with your schoolwork, or maybe it's like you want to be a professional squash player. You have to be able to see the trajectory. So there's
Yes,
yeah. So
self-esteem or many, many things actually, even leadership, if you wish, no? It helps
absolutely.
in so
Yeah.
many different soft skills playing sports,
Yes.
any
So
sport.
many soft skills. Yeah.
Yes. I was wondering if this is out of ignorance, not knowing. I do know that, for instance, people with physical disabilities, wheelchair users, play tennis.
Yes.
I wonder if there are any teams that play squash, and if it is possible to play squash on a
So
wheelchair.
it's we're it's something that we're working on with the Olympics,
Hmm.
Paralympics. There is wheelchair squash, and we also have a deaf squash league, and that has a global championship tournament. But it's not every year. But they the last one they did was right before COVID. So it's squash is you're in that tiny little space.
Yeah, that's why I
We're
was.
making strides. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I was curious to know if there were anything, if there was anything happening also in that area, and
Yeah,
I'm
I don't know
interested to
if
follow it
we'll
up.
have teams ready for the Paralympics, but they may be. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Let's keep an eye on that. Are organizations too focused on celebrating inclusion milestones, risking complacency instead of driving sustainable progress?
I do think that again for people that are in the industry, we have a different perspective than the general public.
Hmm.
I think that when I talk to friends who, are not, they enjoy sports, but they are not involved in any way in what's going on behind the scenes, I do think that there's a little bit too much emphasis on some of the big highlights, these milestones like the U.S. women's national soccer, when they got their equal pay.
Hmm.
A lot of people think, oh, they like check it off, like, oh, great, women in sport are getting paid equally because it gets so much press. And at the end of the day, uh, there's still so much to do. So, and we need people that are not in the sports industry to help us overcome the hurdles that we have. I mean, at the Paris Olympics, the number's getting better. It was 20% of the coaches at the Paris Olympics were women. That was up from 13% in Tokyo. So it's heading in the right direction, but it's still big gap. And then, for sports media coverage overall, only like 15% is focused on women's sports. And then depending on which studies you look at for sponsorship dollars, it's somewhere between 1 to 10% go to women.
Hmm.
So that's why it's good to focus on the milestones, but at the same time, I think it would be helpful to also say there's still like a lot of work to be done. Yeah.
Yeah, you're moving with whoever believes in what you are doing in the right direction, in any case, step by step. Um, well, I believe very much in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I love the Sustainable Development Goal 17 that talks about partnerships. So, what role do partnerships between private organizations and global institutions like the United Nations play in advancing inclusion and sustainability from your experience?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question because number 17 is my favorite too. And I think, I always say, like, to people at the UN, I said, I don't know why you put number 17, partnerships at number 17. It actually should be, in
Should
my
be at the
mind, it should be
top.
number one.
Yes.
Yeah. Because, there's so much work that is going on, good work that's going on at the UN, but it's sometimes gets stuck in the bubble, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I think that we have to like hit again from all different sides, whether it's, the top down, the bottom up. And that's where, I've really enjoyed the projects that I've done at the UN because I've been able to bring in private sector on like the International Day of Sport for Development and Peace as examples of what the UN is working on. So and in my bubble, in the squash bubble, it's been very important to have partnerships with the stakeholders, with the sponsors, with the media, with the players. We don't have any sport if we don't have the players. So I am a big fan of partnerships in moving the needle.
I usually ask in the second part of this fantastic conversation we're having 3 questions, one about the past, present, and future. So allow me to ask you, once upon a time, in your journey through sports and corporate leadership, what scalable practices have you discovered that truly succeed in fostering inclusion across industries?
I would have to say the merger is something that actually scaled from after we did it. We saw pretty soon after the in the United States, college squash is very big. It's very popular,
Mm-hmm.
and college squash also had two separate governing bodies for the men and the women. And so they actually used our roadmap to merge, and it completely has transformed college squash. I mean, it's that's a whole other conversation, but that's what it's all of these things are scalable, and it's been great to see even just within my own sport that it can happen.
Good practice is a very good
Yeah.
example. Uh, Now, moving to the present, how would you pitch equality access and equal prize money for women in sports, athletes and amateurs, with or without disabilities, to a room full of skeptics in just 30 seconds?
I would say that investing in equality is not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And the rising tide will lift all the boats, and everybody who touches the sport will benefit.
Indeed. And from equality then to equity, which is even more stronger, I think. So
Yeah.
I like this vision you have. And talking about the vision, let's move to the future. So imagine yourself being 20 years old in 2071. What governance reforms would you hope to see to ensure inclusion and social sustainability that are central to organizational decision making?
If in 2071, what I would love to see, and we've talked about this in squash too, we're not actually talking about it. We don't have to talk about it. It's just it's part of it's just part of the way we're living and governing.
Mhm.
And I have complete faith in these next generations, because the young ones, that these young athletes that are coming up, they they are looking through a totally different lens than I am, and they're really pushing in that direction. So I would say that hopefully we're not talking about it in 2071, but if we are, I've always been very big on policy. Not everybody is, because they think that you shouldn't have to have policy in place to mandate like something like equal prize money. But for us, it's worked. And to be honest with you, we still have the mandate in our tour documents that if you host a top tournament, you have to have a women's division, and
Mhm.
B, you have to offer equal prize money. But to be honest with you, I don't even think we need the policy anymore. But we needed it in the beginning to get started.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up the conversation, Ashley. Um, how have initiatives like the JP Morgan Women's Leadership Program and the US Open Women in Sports Day shaped the visibility and support for female athletes? And then looking ahead, what key challenges still stand in the way of achieving true gender parity in sports, in your view?
I think that these the women leadership programs, which so I started the one with John Nimick at the TOC, and then they had asked me to help start one for U.S. Squash. Then they did one in Chicago. They've done it in Hong Kong. They've done it in Manchester. They give visibility. The female athletes need visibility, because at the end of the day, sports, a lot of what sports is about at the pro level is about money, and the money is tied to the eyeballs and how many people are watching the sport, are buying the tickets, or betting, or those kind of things. So anything that we can do, these events have really helped put the women under the spotlight, and in some cases our honorees have said it's the first time that they've been recognized with an award, and some of these are like the top women players in the world. So it's been great also to give them a chance to tell their story. And the biggest hurdle, I would say, is that it's this never ending loop of the sponsors say nobody watches the women. So if we don't have viewers for the women,
Mm-hmm.
it's, they have all their matrices for how they invest. So to me, the biggest hurdle is the media piece, because then you say, okay, well, nobody's watching the women, but you're not even putting them on, TV. Or if you do put something on, it's at like 3 a.m. So they're not, we need more prime time visibility, and more investment in the sport.
If someone would like to get in touch with Heaven Hill or learn and benefit of your experience, or else, how can people get in touch with the organizations, or else?
Well, easily through our website, havenhill.net. And I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn. So either of those places, I'm always happy to talk to people. And I'm also enjoying, like, the work that I do in the private sector. So it's all good.
I can see that. And thank you, because I could listen sometimes, the firemen passing by, the ambulances, and you brought me back to Manhattan. I miss that so much. You can't imagine. It's so quiet here, which is nice
Oh,
on one hand, but that kind of energy there is there. It's really magic and unique.
it
Ashley,
is great.
thank you so much for this fantastic conversation, the time you spent with us. And I really hope to see you soon once I come to New York. Okay?
Well, Daniela, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to more conversations with you. And I just want to read you quickly
Please
the
do.
two sentences Mandela, what he had to say about sport, which has really become like my guiding light. And he said, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way little else does. So I'll leave you with that.
Yes, thank you so much. And as I usually say, ciao, ciao.
As I wrap up this episode, my heartfelt gratitude to today's guest and to all of you. Join me for the next episode as we delve deeper with special guests, uncovering thought-provoking insights and actionable steps, paving the way for a brighter, inclusive, sustainable tomorrow. Thanks also to Damian Morton, music, and Maria Cortez Gagliano, social media. Don't miss out next episode on shaping the future we aspire to. Ciao, ciao!